folks, and welcome back to Four Corners of the Galley. I'm your host, PBO, and you're joining me on another edition of Unsolved, the murders of Biggie and Tupac. We're all the way up to episode number 9? Yeah, 9. Christopher. I almost called it 8, but it's episode 9, Christopher, and we only got one more episode to go next week. So this is, just like last week where we had the episode called Tupac and Shakur, this is actually called Christopher. Not Christopher Wallace, but Christopher. Why Christopher? Well, because if you look through the history and through the movies and different interviews and stuff, Valletta Wallace, Miss Wallace, Biggie Smalls' mother, always called him Christopher. And they had a special bond, a special mother and son bond that they really kind of show, which is the best parts of this show that they really showed off. And I really enjoyed that. And this is the way she called her son Christopher, not Christopher Wallace or Chris, but Christopher. And I like how they kind of use the way that each mom kind of said their own name, because you know that Phoenix Shakur would always call Tupac by his full name. She seemed like one of those moms that give you the full name speech when you know you're in trouble at all times. So that part is great. So what I did really like about this episode was I did like all the Miss Wallace stuff. I thought that was great. What really bugged me about this episode is this is an exact same parallel to last week's episode. Just replace Biggie with Tupac, and it's exactly the same. We get 5 minutes at the beginning of Biggie, well, not even really Biggie, but kind of some memories of Biggie and Miss Wallace. Then we get a whole bunch of Task Force and Pool, and the Task Force basically goes through the exact same beats they went through last week, getting lost, figuring out stuff, and then figuring it out, and then stumbling across some information at the end that helps them out. And Pool, we just get to see him spinning out of control. So I'll go into more details about each line, but it's the exact same episode, just different. I mean, just with a different name and instead of Biggie and Pac, and that's it. It really bugs me that we come into the finale of this, and we're getting such little of the what we really came for, and more of just dealing with the task force. And really, they're focusing more on the two leaders of the one, Poole, who was the lead investigator from the original case of Biggie, and Kane, where they're showing the symmetry between these two men, and they're basically making them almost exactly the same. Like, they both struggling with this case and how each one of them ruined their marriage, and this case overwhelmed them and took over. When I look at it, like, don't you guys realize that 2 young black men were murdered and you guys didn't solve this case, and we're over here focused on what the people investigating was about? The bigger crime is that these 2 great hip-hop artists and young men at the time were murdered, and we still don't have an answer, and they're more focused on the men that were chasing after the murders of these 2. So that's where I just do not like that directional part, and think that that's kind of like a lot of waste of time. Also in the task force timeline, we get the Perez thing again, or the Torres case again, and more about the Torres case just to show him he's breaking more. I mean, really, that information has nothing to do with trying to figure out the unsolved murders of Biggie and Tupac. So that's just my little 2 cents at the start. Let me just kind of give you the highlights that I liked from this episode that I thought were great. I'm going to go over a lot of the Valletta Wallace storyline because that was good. I give you the highlights from Poole and the Task Force because they kind of follow the same thing. So we start off, and I don't know if it's the day after or the next day, because I don't know if she definitely got that call early in the morning, and so she probably couldn't get out to LA till way later. So this is Valletta Wallace, Miss Wallace, showing up to Biggie's hotel room after he was murdered, and she's in the last place he is and sees all his stuff, and they show these great memories that she's having, or that she was having at that day, or that they show you. And some of the coolest stuff was showing how Biggie was a straight up hustler from the start. And he had an Atari system back in the days, and he was charging kids to play his Atari and wanted change from his mom because he was getting his hustle on, and she couldn't believe it. She's like, why are you charging your friends to play games? He's like, well, you won't let me go down to the local arcade. She's like, there's bad men in there. He's like, all right, well, I'm just trying to get on the come up. So trying to show him that he was like a little hustler from the start. They also show this other good little thing where a little older Biggie, where he's more of a teenager and he's 16 at the time, and he's trying to get this older girl, and he wants his mom to lie to this older girl and tell her that she's like 19 and he's 19 or 20 so he can get it. And I love that Valletta Wallace is not having that game. My boy is 16 and should be in school, and the girl's like in complete shock. I thought that was a greatness, and he just can't say nothing about it. She's like, Ma, what the? What I really did love was they showed some great moments with Biggie and Miss Wallace, and they showed this great bond that the two had, and they had only each other, and you could see it there, and you could really see that Biggie really wanted to do good by his mom and really take care of her, and that's the best part that I love that they show, and it's a really sad and somber scene. I was kind of hoping they would give a little more of that last week to Pac, show a little more of Feeny and Pac scenes, but you didn't really get that much of that. Where I feel like you got a lot more of Letta Wallace and Biggie, which I really enjoyed. So she's in the room, shows all the different things. It also shows the parallels between Afeni and Valletta Wallace and how each one of them, where Afeni had to actually deal with seeing her son and watching her son die in front of her. Biggie was taken before she even had a chance, and she only had one last conversation with him, which we'll get to in a second. And she has to just deal with the complete utter shock that it's happened. So I love showing that these two powerful women and how they had to deal with this situation. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that I really liked about that episode. So, you know, she's there. They show this different stuff. It ends at the end with her, and you're at one of Biggie's concerts before all this, and his mom shows up. She's got some flowers, nice mink coat, and he's like, "You just like enjoy the limo?" And she's like, "Oh, don't do all this, don't fuss. I don't want you losing your money. You know, I don't need you to give me all this. I don't want you to end up like MC Hammer." And he's like, "Don't worry, I'm not gonna end up like MC Hammer. I'm gonna take care of you, mom. We gonna make it. You ain't never gonna be broke again." He's like, "I just want to make you proud," and I love that they show that like interaction and back and forth, and you can see it in Miss Wallace's face how proud she is, and then she goes to like try to like school him, and before she could even turn around, he's already out of there jumping on stage. It's kind of like that, like her baby's grown up kind of thing. I kind of like saw that moment. I liked it, kind of that shock that her little boy is now a man out there making money and has thousands and thousands of people. She even made a comment about a girl. "That girl has your face on her," and he's like, "It's just a fan." That would be a shock if you're a mom and know nothing about hip hop, and your son is this prodigy, and he comes out of nowhere, and you know nothing about it, and all of a sudden you're at one of his shows, and some random girl's got a picture of your son. You'd be like, "What the heck is going on?" I thought that was great. I thought that was a great moment. And then it actually ends with a beautiful moment with her, where she's back in the room again. They get back to her in the room, and she's there, and they flash back to actually the first scene of the whole show, and it's Biggie on the phone with his mom on that last night having a great conversation, and I like how they show that, and then she's remembering that phone call, and then she goes outside to that balcony and sees, you know, what he saw, the last things he saw. I love that symmetry back and forth. I think they do a great job with what we do get of Biggie and Pac and Miss Wallace and Feeny. I think they do a great job with it, and I just wish there was a lot more of it. So definitely some of the best parts about it. So let's get some of the highlights of the pool. So Poole, Mr. Russell Poole, we meet up with him at some weird juncture, because at the beginning they show this scene where they show the old bullpen of the robbery and homicide, but you really don't know what's going on, and Internal Affairs shows up, and they start going through Detective Zest. They find some tape that's marked with Wallace, and you do find some pretty cool information, which is that Perez, the guy that was, you know, that was the inspiration for Training Day and that was doing all the dirt and had all the craziness and the drug bust and stuff, him and Mac he admitted that him and Mac worked for Death Row on tape and were at the Peterson that night of the incident. What you do come to find out later is that Fred just feels like that it was just all BS and he was saying anything, but I see it as more as they look past the really important information, because they didn't want to dig up that hole and get real deep into it and see how many cops were truly working for Death Row or how many cops were just dirty in general that could have been on the take. So that's where I see it as they really backed off of that part, but to see that was pretty cool. You see Poole struggling with regular life. He's coaching his kids, and they're trying to show you the symmetry between him being a coach and Kane being a coach. I was like, okay, and then they show that he goes on another job interview, and he really can't get any jobs because he wants to be in law enforcement, but because he basically exposed this ginormous Biggie case before it could complete, and he took it to the press and went against all the brass and, you know, undercut them, that law authority doesn't want anything to do with them. So he ends up getting a job as courthouse security. I mean, just a security guard with a wand, from a detective taking on some of the biggest cases. He's now at a courthouse with a wand, making sure people just don't bring any weapons into a courthouse. So he's okay with it because he feels like he's still doing good. He meets up with Fred, They have conversations, and the biggest thing that comes out of that, which I thought for sure was going to happen, was he tells them about a task force that they're going to put together to really go back and investigate the Biggie case. And I thought that was the best thing to come out of it, because you already know, and if you've seen the trailer for next week, they're going to have a big meetup between Poole and Kane. So they're trying to meet with these two men and see. That should be definitely some interesting scenes to see that next week. But that's the best thing you get out of the Poole. Moving on to the task force, I mean, this is the same kind of deal that you jump back into it, and the CI of Percy, who they think is Amir, who's been faking him, they're still lost on what's going on. So it has some fun stuff at the beginning, but it's also like a lot of extra ratchet up tension that really doesn't pay off that well, and it doesn't really do anything different from the story. It just kind of builds up the tension of the scene, but then in reality, nothing comes out of it, and you just keep moving forward, and nothing comes out of all the tension they build up. They build up a lot of tension in their scenes when a lot of things don't really go bad or have anything go wrong whatsoever. So they do try to meet up with Pierce again, which is a funny scene, and they try to see him again, and they find out that he went out the night before at a club with Suge. So their CI that's supposed to be going against Suge, who's supposed to be helping him, is actually still hanging out with Suge. So they go to try to go get him, and when they show up at his house, he's got like a different car in a Lexus. They pull up to the side of him. They're like, "All right, man." He's like, "Yeah." And then he books it, and a car chase ensues. And you're like, "Oh man!" And it's a quick little car chase. He kind of kicks through an alley, hits another car, crashes, and then this fool gets crazier from this point and tries to carjack the lady. They jump out. We're like, "Man!" They stop him. They're like, "What the heck are you doing?" And when they get him back to the task force area, they put him on a lie detector, and they start asking him questions about the whole Biggie case. Like, were you there on the Peterson? Did you kill Biggie? Do you know who killed Biggie? And he fails this test miserably. I mean, absolutely miserably. And then when they're talking to him about stuff, he's like, "Man, I was just trying to get away. I'm just acting crazy." So I did like that kind of sequence, but like I said, they got this guy Pierce. They get all this information. It doesn't go anywhere. They kind of stumble across the other person, Teresa, who is the front on some of the stuff that they get to bigger. But it's a lot of just stumbling around, and the clues that they have really don't work out, and they kind of get lucky on something else, and that's how they kind of move forward with this case. And that's been the whole way they've been treating this task force. Is they stumble, the evidence goes good for a half a second, it fails, and then they stumble onto something else and they move forward. So their big stumble on is they do this real cool throwback scene where they show a young Suge in 1996, a couple of days before the Vegas fight, and he's picking up he's getting a custom Impala made for Tupac, and it's got this beautiful mural on the back of the truck of Tupac, and he's picking up for Pac. He's like, "It's a gift for Pac when we get back from Vegas." So obviously we all know that goes. He never got that beautiful Impala. So it kicks to 10 years later, and I guess that Impala still exists. And there's some new owner who owns it at a garage, and a bunch of Shugs and the guy that helped make the car show up to take this car back, and they end up just jacking this car back from this dealer, from this garage deal, the guy that owns the car from the garage. And what ends up with that is that kind of just gets brushed under the radar, but the task force somehow ends up with it and realizes this is something they can use, because they can use this guy saying that Suge personally spoke to him, and they're trying to pressure and use Suge as leverage for his third strike, obviously, at this point. So what does came out of this is they find out that this car is registered to Teresa, and Teresa is actually one of Suge's baby mamas and exes, and he has a daughter with her. And what they find out about Teresa is that Teresa has a whole bunch of different fake IDs and stuff, and that she actually owns the 626 in Vegas and owns a whole bunch of cars. And Teresa on the side has been buying cars and flipping them. Well, Suge steals back this Impala, takes it to a pawn shop, and that's how they get back to this car and get all these things, all this information, run the plates and everything, and get back to Teresa. So they have a sit down with Teresa, and they're trying to convince Teresa that, look, Suge ain't gonna look out for you, and that you need to come and flip on our side so that we can get this taken care of, and you can live. You need to look out for your daughter and your brother, because Suge ain't gonna look out for you. You're gonna go to jail for him. And they're trying to push on him. At the same time, they have this funny little event that really doesn't lead up to anything, where Kane and Dupree end up going on a stakeout again to where Suge's house, and Kane gets so excited because he sees Suge's truck, so he wants to put a tracker on him. He ends up getting over there, and Suge ends up hearing some noises and stuff, comes outside, checks on it. Kane's underneath, nothing really happens. He runs back. Dupree gets mad at him. You should be carrying your gun, and it's like, a whole bunch of just back and forth. It's a lot of falling into things and getting lucky. So the big thing is Teresa now looks like she's going to flip on Suge at the end, and maybe we might get a bigger investigation out of this. So hopefully we get a nice big culmination to this in episode 10, and we do get some resolute to a lot of these unanswered questions, and maybe some cool unseen scenes we don't know about. So there you go, folks. There is my review of Unsolved, the murders of Tupac and Biggie Christopher. Like I said, I love the Christopher stuff. I love the Loretta Wallace stuff just as much as I love the Tupac stuff, but the exact same storyline and outline and beats that the last episode took, this episode took, and it just stinks when you get to this point. So, all right, folks. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please come back next week for the finale so we can close this sucker out and hopefully end with a big old smile on our face, because I know I want to. In case you guys are checking out Atlanta, I got last week's episode right here. Also, I got Westworld. What the bleep? Maybe you'll check out some Westworld, maybe you're not. It's got that right here, too. All right, folks. Till next time. Good night, Ted.